Lippincott, and welcome to another episode of Modern Jazz Noise. For those of you who've been following this series, you may notice that I've taken a little bit of a hiatus recently. Life kind of got in the way, but I'm back and I've got more episodes planned for the future that I think are pretty cool, so stay tuned. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty cool pedal that you've seen on my pedal board in the past, but I haven't really devoted a whole episode to it. Today we're talking about the Maneco Looper Sweet 16, and this is a delay looper pedal. It was made as a sort of a recreation of a classic Electro-Harmonix pedal called the 16-second delay that debuted in the early 80s. It was one of the coolest pedals ever made. I first became aware of this pedal because of seeing Bill Frisell use one. I was totally not only blown away by Bill Frisell's genius as a musician, but also by the sounds that he got out of this little Electro-Harmonix device. It became kind of a passion of mine to pursue getting something along those lines. I've still to this day never owned one of the original Electro-Harmonix 16-second delays, but I've owned tons of different devices that have kind of done similar things. And I was really excited a few years ago when I found out about this pedal coming out, because it was the first time I'd seen one that purported to be a pretty much exact recreation of that original pedal. For those of you who are into this stuff, you may know that Electro-Harmonix did do a reissue of the 16-second delay, I think in the early 2000s maybe, but it wasn't really the same pedal, and it just didn't have the same stuff and the same functionality, the same vibe. There are other pedals, you know, that have been made that I've had too. Everything from the Digitech Echo Plus to the Boomerang phrase sampler, to different other Electro-Harmonix pedals like the Memory Man with Hazarai. I also, for a while, had the Electro-Harmonix 2880, which was a looping device that did do a lot of the stuff that the original Electro-Harmonix 16-second delay did, but again, not quite the same. They later came out with the 4500, which just had longer memory. I never had one of those. There are companies also that have kind of made a foray into this kind of psychedelic looper stuff that the 16-second delay is known for. A lot of you may be familiar with the company Chase Bliss that has some pedals that do some really crazy psychedelic things like the Mood and the Blooper and others along those lines. There's also a couple of other pedals that I've been recently made aware of that I don't know too much about yet. There's one made by a company called Expedition Electronics, the 60-second Deluxe. I spied that on Nels Klein's pedal table a few months ago, and then also just recently I found out about one called the Soma Laboratory Cosmos that seems like it might be kind of interesting. But anyway, so there are a few products out there that will kind of do a similar thing to this, but today we're going to be talking about, of course, this pedal and some of the cool Electro-Harmonix 16-second delay stuff that you can get out of this pedal. So here we go. Let's talk about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. And of course my pedal board, I've got my signal running into the pedal board and then out of the output of the pedal board into the Sweet 16, so all the effects on the pedal board will go into the Sweet 16. So we got my Conklin 8-string, and right now I've got no effects on it whatsoever. Everything you see in front of you is off, even though it's running through the circuitry. And then I'm running directly into my computer logic just using a Vox style amp sim that comes with Logic, but I do have a Celestion IR that kind of sweetens things up a little bit. this is my guitar with the tone wide open. Here's with the tone all the way down, which is what I usually use for a straight ahead jazz sound, but we're probably going to be heading outside of that realm sound-wise, so I'm going to keep the tone control brighter. And then I'm also going to add in my EP booster and SP compressor, which is just a subtle compression with the blend almost maybe like at 25%. So you still got a lot of subtle dynamics. And then I'm also going to add in the big sky here, the bloom setting. And now for our main event. This is the Sweet 16 digital delay by Maneco Looper. This is actually an earlier incarnation than what they sell now. The company basically is making a different version. I think it's basically the same functionality, but the chassis looks more like the original Electro-Harmonix 16-second delay. I bought this one when they first started making them. As soon as I found out about it, I knew I had to have one, so I asked the guy to build me one. And one thing I will say is the build quality is not the greatest. I mean, you can see that there's 4 screws that hold the faceplate, and one of them has broken off, and the other one, I can't remember what happened. I think that maybe the screw stripped out or something. And also, I have had varying problems with these switches. I believe it's the infinite switch for a while was not working, and I had to open up the unit and kind of reconfigure the switch. It was kind of mechanically messed up. Now the same thing has happened with the bypass switch. So the bypass switch is always on. I can't get it to come off, which is fine because there's plenty of other ways to have nothing happening with this delay. As a matter of fact, right now you're not hearing anything from the delay. What I'm going to do is turn the reverb back off for now so that you can hear the delay in its more pure form. The first thing I did was I made sort of a setting on here that's basically like a traditional delay. If I turn the infinite switch off, you'll be able to hear it. So you can hear the echo. And I have it set to maybe what I might use with an overdrive. So here's that. So just kind of a traditional delay. You might be able to hear that there's some modulation on the delay. Just a little bit of pitch warble to give it that chorusy effect that is so much more attractive than a traditional chorus pedal, in my opinion. And that is courtesy of these 2 controls. Now, let's kind of go through the controls of this thing. So while we're on the subject, this is the modulation controls. This controls the speed of the modulation. You can see this blinking blue light gives you what your speed is, and then the intensity of the modulation. What I will say about the modulation effect with these 2 knobs is that you get quite a range. It can go really extreme. Actually, this is the mix knob, which just, brings the effect higher in the mix. Before I had it set to where I, for normal playing, but I brought the mix way up. You can hear that it's even a little bit louder than the dry signal at this point. But now, let's see what happens if I play around with these. I'll bring the intensity higher, and you can already tell that it's pretty crazy. If I bring it all the way up, it's just insane. And then let's see what happens if I bring the speed up. That's maximum everything. And I actually do use that occasionally for just extreme effects if I want to. The other stuff I don't really ever use. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but what I have it set right now, I really never use this pedal for that, for just a traditional delay. It's a little bit clunky to get it set up for that. You got to get everything set just right. And then you're stuck with, using it just for that. And if you mess it up to get to some other thing, then it's hard to get back to the traditional delay sound. Obviously doesn't have any presets, so I don't really ever use it for that, but I just wanted to demonstrate that it is possible to use it for that. Okay, so anyway, we've demonstrated the mix control, the modulation. Right now I have it set to no modulation. This is the repeats. So now you have to be real careful with this because it can, if you turn it up really far, it goes completely nuts. I've noticed I turned the mix way down because and now of course here's my delay time. So that's just crazy. If I turned this any higher, it would blow my preamps. And of course, the feedback is so massive right now that you, believe it or not, the stuff that I'm playing is going into the delay, but the feedback is so intense that you can't even hear the stuff that I'm playing into it now. So now let's see what happens if I back up on this. So again, it's still, at this point, acting more or less like a regular delay mic. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the other kind of unique features of this unit. So this button says record tap. So that means right now, I've already set it to this particular delay time, although I can change it with the delay time knob, of course. But if I wanted to change the master delay time, so to speak, I could turn it back so that the red light's on. And there, or let's do a longer one. So it doesn't work like a traditional tap tempo. This basically is off and this is on, but how long you leave this on is basically your tempo. And then if I leave it on for a little longer, but again, it can be changed. Now, we also have the switch up here that says SLWESFST, which is slow fast. So when it's in the up position, that's the slow position, and then fast is the down position. And what that means is if I play, hear how it basically doubled the delay time instantly. And that can be really useful when I'm using this like a looper. And incidentally, if I start with it fast and then bring it down here, it brings everything way down here. I'll bring the mix up all the way. Bring the feedback up a little bit. And now we're getting into some interesting stuff that this pedal really excels at. Oh, and then this infinite switch, when I hit that, it freezes no matter where the feedback knob is. It basically just keeps repeating what's in the buffer over and over again without it feeding back or without it, going away. So in other words, if I make some kind of a loop, let's say, now I'm going to make a longer loop that's more of a proper loop, let's say. So let's say that length. And now it's just going to keep repeating forever regardless of where the feedback is. But I can still manipulate, I can still change the balance, and I can still mess with this. Now, something interesting about how the delay time knob and the slow fast interact with each other. I mean, you'll notice that, usually I'm starting with the delay time all the way to the left here, which is its longest. And then it gets shorter as I go. Okay, now I froze that, and now see what happens when I move this thing. So notice that it's double times 2. It's the 4 times speed if I go all the way up 2 octaves. There's 1 octave about, and of course I've got all the gradations in between. But then I can also go exactly double speed or an octave with this switch. And the same thing kind of happens when I move the knob when it's in this position. Now you would think that if I keep going, I'll get to 4 times that speed, but watch what happens. At some point, it jumps back down. It gets almost to 4 times speed. It's maybe like, there's a G, so it goes up to an octave G, and then it goes, I guess that's like a tritone. Oh, there's a 5th. Okay, so it gets up to an octave plus a 5th, basically. And then it jumps back down if I keep going. And in this part of it pretty much is no different from the slow position. Kind of weird. And when I first got the pedal, I thought that was kind of a weird quirk. But one thing that I've noticed is if you do have it it's kind of fun to play around with where that break happens. At least I think it's fun. But anyway, so that's one kind of weird quirk of the way that thing works. Even when this thing is off or in the red, it's still listening to you, it's still recording. I haven't completely figured out exactly how many seconds you get. The original Electro-Harmonix pedal was advertised as, you know, having 16 seconds of delay, but I've clocked this one at longer than 16 seconds. And of course, if you go to the slow speed, you get longer than that as well. It's not like you have to go to the slow speed to get the 16 seconds. So, but even at the highest speed, the fast, and start here, you can probably get, I think I measured it as like 21 seconds. For example, if I'm gonna start the, you know, put it in the red and start playing. And this has probably been at least 20 seconds or so. So I don't think you didn't hear the very beginning of what I played because it came up against the time limit, but you hear quite a bit. And like I said, when I measured this, it turned out to be about 21 seconds. And then if I bring it down to half speed, of course, that'll be 42 seconds about. And then finally, we get to the reverse function. Reverse. And of course, if I take away the infinite switch, if I turn it off, I can overdub on top of this. So now the second layer that I added is slowed down 4 times and in reverse, and so forth. So it's a really cool little, scratch pad looper, and the pedal, the Electro-Harmonix 16-second delay that this is a recreation of, was really the first digital looper that was ever made. So something that I may not have mentioned before also is you'll notice right away when I record something, let's say, you'll notice that the fidelity is not great. Sounds kind of grainy. And if I recorded it at fast speed and then slow it down, you'll hear that effect even more extremely. It has that real grainy, low bit kind of sound. But all I know is it's kind of a cool thing to have that lo-fi kind of sound by default. Like, you can't really get rid of it. This says clix, which is the terminology used from the original pedal. I think there was actually like a click, like a little metronome kind of a thing you could use in the original pedal. But this just tells you what your delay time is set to. So let's say, so that shows you where the beginning of each loop is, and if now it gets faster. the clix. So that's just basically a LED that shows you what the delay time is at. And then lastly, we have the switch up here at the top. It says vintage on this side. Supposedly, this allows you to go back and forth between more like a recent way that a delay or looper works, or the vintage way. And what the vintage means is, with the old Electro-Harmonix pedal, it was sort of always listening and recording, even when it was off. And if you just hit the button to play, you know, to record something, you could just basically be in the middle of playing a solo, let's say, and say, oh, I want to repeat that, and hit the button, and it would start repeating, you know, it would start a loop of what you just played, because it was always listening, even if it was off. And but I demonstrated that earlier, but it was not in the vintage mode. I have yet to find any difference between vintage and non-vintage mode. It's listening either way the switch is flipped, it's always listening. So I don't know, you know, whether the switch doesn't work or whether there's just something about the non-vintage mode that I don't know about how it works. I don't know, but I just have always kind of kept it on the vintage by default, even though I had it over here. Like I said, it doesn't really seem to make a difference to me one way or the other. Okay, so let's play around a little bit with this and maybe get some crazy sounds with it. Oh, there is one other cool thing that I forgot to mention before. So far, I've been, you know, playing around, like recording stuff and then hitting reverse to make it go backwards. But let's see what happens if I record something while the reverse switch is on. What do you know? The loop immediately starts playing backwards, which I think that's very cool. And of course, I can always make it go forward again. But you know, if I want to make a reverse loop and I don't, I have to go through the hassle of, okay, I'll make the loop. And then hit the reverse switch. If I already have the reverse switch flipped and I play the loop, then it starts out in reverse. And then I hit the fast switch. Now if I have it in fast mode, it's you know, not going to go up an octave when I play. It's just going to be at that double speed recording. So for example, like this. And if I want it to go half speed, I gotta flip the switch. Or if I record at half speed, it's just gonna be, and then it'll go to double speed. One of the reasons that this switch can really come in handy is if I'm making a loop, especially, you know, over a certain harmony, let's say, for example. Turn on some reverb. Now it went to half speed. And I'm still playing in the key of C, as I was, and it still works. If I had to eyeball it with this thing, let's say I want to go to double speed now. Okay, I think I got there. But, you know, it's a lot quicker to do that. And let's say that I just happen to have the, you know, the delay time knob somewhere weird when I record the loop. And then okay, I want to change the octave, but I still want to be able to play over it in the same key because I'm playing with a, you know, a band and the bass player is still grooving in a C. And I want to go an octave higher. Oh, I don't know. But if I use that switch, then even if this is in a weird spot, I always know it'll go an octave higher or an octave lower. Okay, so I can add to that. Also, notice that the more it repeats, that you get this kind of nasty sound from the feedback. Even though the feedback's not all the way up like this, if it's anywhere past, let's say 75%, it'll start getting that kind of nasty feedbacky kind of thing, and that can be kind of unpleasant to hear. Now I'm going to record a little loop that's maybe a chord progression, just a simple one. And let's say, okay, I got a nice little loop there. It sounds a little lo-fi. But now I'm going to add some fairy dust on top of it by doing this. Bring it down an octave backwards and record a little stuff over it. All right, I got some stuff going on there. Now bring it back to where I started. Now you will notice that the original loop has degraded considerably. But I got this nice little fairy dust layer over the top of it. So that's something that I often will do with, let's say, the microcosm. You know, record something and then slow it down, reverse it, record something on top of it, take it back to where it was, and then you get this little octave higher and backwards thing going on top of it that's, you know, can be kind of a subtle, nice little effect. This unit, as you can see, can do that, but because of the degrading and because of the fidelity of it, it's not perfect for that. And that loop that I made was in tempo, but this doesn't excel. Like if you want to lay down a rhythm guitar track and solo over it, I would definitely not recommend this pedal. This is really only for sonic mayhem. And so far, I've mostly been using this to do kind of tonal stuff, either, you know, a atmospheric bed of a chord or little melodies, but can also be really nice for just real crazy sounding stuff. Let's say something like this here. Getting a little crazy there with the... there's the extreme stuff with the modulation. Something along those lines. Just, you know, really crazy kind of psychedelic sounds. And that to me is what this thing really excels at, is that kind of stuff. You know, I don't always get that like completely atonal with it or whatever. Also, while I'm recording, if I move this around, and then I go back to where I started, that one note, that G that I was playing, is moving all over the place. Yeah, let me demonstrate that. And then if I add this to it, so hours of fun for the whole family. One other sort of trick that I kind of stole from Bill Frisell, watching him use loopers. Let's say I recorded a loop of some sort. Backwards. And now, put on an overdrive pedal maybe. So what I'm doing there is I made the loop to start with, and then I turned on the overdrive pedal and I was kind of making weird noises, harmonics, whatever. But I would only turn the infinite off for a second, and that would mean it would only be recording while the thing was off. So if I go... and I get this interesting effect of all these little chords blipping on and off. Now, one thing that I have also noticed I turned the reverse off, which means the original loop that I recorded is now forward. And you would think that the little blips and bloops that I added are going to sound backwards, but they don't, because the start point and the end point are both sudden. And so when you reverse that, it just sounds the same. That's essentially the Sweet 16. Just wanted to kind of take it through its paces and show it off in, show a spotlight on that pedal for a little bit, because I hadn't really ever done that before, even though I have demonstrated it in the context of my bigger pedal board before. But anyway, just wanted to, you know, take a little deeper dive into this pedal and show you some of the things that it does and take it through its paces. I hope you found that freaky and interesting and fun and useful. And me and this pedal have had some good times together, and I'm sure we'll have some good times together again in the future. I'm hanging on to this one, even though it's not on my pedal board anymore. And be sure and check back for new episodes coming up in the future. I've got some cool stuff planned, and I'll see you later. You know, you can go now. I'm done with the video. It's over. You can go. No, really. You don't have to stick around. No, there's no you know, Easter egg thing at the end. None of that crazy, you know, video and sound effects that I've done before. Nope, that's not happening. You just don't do it. Don't just go. Just leave. Look. It's time for you to go. There's nothing left to see here. It's just me sitting here and wondering why you're still watching, okay? There's really, honestly, there's nothing that's going to be happening. Okay, I lied.
I am morphed into the Sweet 16 title. It's time for my Sweet 16 birthday party.
Hi, I'm Tom Lippincott, and welcome to another episode of Modern Jazz Noise. I have